A very close call in Ukraine with potentially devastating consequences. President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country narrowly avoided nuclear disaster when electricity was cut to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. According to Zelensky, Russian shelling disrupted a nearby coal station, causing it to go dark. The plant has been under Russian control since March and has also come close to leaking radiation due to nearby shelling. Moscow and Kyiv are both blaming each other for those strikes. Retired U.S. Army Major General William L. Enyart is here now. General, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
So Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, it is the largest of its kind in all of Europe. It is right in the middle of a war zone. How concerning is this? It seems like both sides are aware that they don't want a nuclear disaster to happen, but neither side is willing to just stop fighting around the area and demilitarize it.
Well, I think we need to keep one thing clear. Who is the aggressor here? Russia invaded Ukraine and stationed its troops and armored vehicles there. Ukraine didn't invade Russia and seize one of its nuclear power plants. Let's keep that clear.
It's not unclear, I don't think. It's just sort of they're there, and it seems like the Ukrainians are trying to get it back. So when Moscow says they're shelling us and they're putting this at risk, that might not be the smartest course of action here, no matter who is actually occupying the plant, right?
Well, that's if you believe Putin's propaganda assertions. We're not really sure. We don't know who's shelling who. The important thing is who is the aggressor here. And frankly, the worldwide concern over the nuclear safety at the plant is legitimate. You know, as you pointed out, it's the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. And with the prevailing wind and weather patterns in Europe, an accident there, a radiation release there, would cover Central and Western Europe with a blanket of radiation that would eventually reach the U.S. And that blanket of radiation could be far worse than Chernobyl ever was.
And I understand this thing is still operating. It is operated by a Ukrainian crew, and it is overlooked by the Russian military. Do we have any idea why Russia wants to hold that nuclear power plant?
Well, I think so. Russia wants to do two things. Number one, it wants to deprive Ukraine of the use of that energy. And number two, it wants to reroute the energy flow into Russia. Now, should those goals change, should Russia decide that it only wants to deprive Ukraine of the energy, I think all bets off as to the future of that, plant. And Putin believes that plant belongs to him. That plant was constructed during the history of the Soviet Union. And so Putin believes that not only that plant, but indeed all of Ukraine belongs to Russia. You really have to remember that this war is a 1,000-year-long war for the future of Ukraine. Here in the U.S., we don't study history that much, and we don't understand that. But Putin cares more about restoring Russian grandeur than he does the possibility of a radioactive Europe, based on his actions to date.
Well, that's highly concerning that he wants to restore the grandeur at the possible expense of a nuclear explosion there. Should there be some sort of demilitarization, as the UN has suggested? The Atomic Energy Agency is close to being able to visit and make sure things are up to snuff there. But should this just be something that there's a giant ring around it and no one's allowed to cross this line?
Oh, absolutely. That would be the ideal solution. The question is whether or not, and Ukraine has indicated that it's willing to do so. Russia has indicated that it's willing to have the inspectors in, but there's been no real talk on the Russian part about demilitarizing it. I doubt very much that Putin would demilitarize it so long as he wants to take that energy and send it to Russia. Should that goal change, then he might well be willing to demilitarize it. Additionally, you're going to have to wonder about who's going to secure that DMZ. Obviously, it couldn't be troops from NATO or from any U.S. ally. Russia doesn't have many allies, so it's going to have to be neutral forces brought in by the UN.
Have to be UN peacekeepers in those lovely blue helmets, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would, and we'd have to find them. The Indians wouldn't want the Pakistanis there. The Pakistanis wouldn't want the Indians there. What nation would have a large enough military to be able to spare those folks and send them in? The Pakis frequently provide forces for UN peacekeeping missions. But when you rule out all of the European nations, you're whittling down the forces available.
All right. That is retired Major General William Enyart. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Pleasure to be with you today.
President Biden set to speak at the upcoming session of.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.